Hey, my lovelies, it's your Pops once again, and I've got another cool story for you. This one is called The Old Man and the Gulls, like seagulls, the gulls. About sunset, it happens every Friday evening on a lonely stretch along the eastern Florida seacoast. You can see an old man walking, white haired, bushy eyebrowed, slightly bent over. One gnarled hand would be gripping the handle of a pale, large bucket filled with shrimp. There, on a broken pier, reddened by the setting sun, the weekly ritual would be reenacted. At once, the silent twilight would become a mass of dancing dots. Growing larger in the distance, screeching calls would become louder. There were seagulls coming from nowhere on the same pilgrimage to meet an old man. For a half hour or so, the gentleman would stand on the pier, surrounded by fluttering white, till his pail of shrimp, surrounded by fluttering white until his pail of shrimp was empty. Better. But the gulls would linger for a while. They would just hang out. Perhaps one would perch comfortably on the old man's hat, and a certain day gone by would gently come to mind. Eventually, all the old man's days were past. If the gulls still returned to that spot, perhaps on a Friday evening at sunset, it's not for food, but to pay homage to the secret they shared with a gentle stranger. And that secret is the rest of the story. Anyone who remembers October 1942 remembers the day it was reported that Captain Eddie Rickenbacker was lost at sea. Captain Eddie's mission had been to deliver a message of the utmost importance to General MacArthur. MacArthur was headquartered in New Guinea, and Rickenbacker was given a B-17 airplane and a hand-picked crew to take him there. But there was an unexpected detour which would hurl Captain Eddie into the most harrowing adventure of his life. Somewhere over the South Pacific, the flying fortress became lost beyond the reach of radio. Fuel ran dangerously low, so the men ditched their plane into the ocean. The B-17 stayed aloft just long enough for all aboard to get out. Then slowly, the tail of the flying fortress swung up and poised for a split second, and the ship went down, leaving 8 men and 3 rafts and the horizon. For nearly a month, Captain Eddie and his companions would fight the water, and the weather, and the scorching sun. They spent many sleepless nights recoiling as giant sharks rammed their rafts. The largest raft was 9 by 5. The largest shark was 10 foot. But all their enemies at sea, the one that proved the most formidable was starvation. 8 days out, their rations were long gone or destroyed by the salt water. It would take a miracle to sustain them, and a miracle occurred. In Captain Eddie's own words, Cherry, that was the name of the B-17 pilot, Captain William Cherry, read the service for that afternoon, and we finished with a prayer for deliverance and a hymn of praise. There was some small talk, but it tapered off in the oppressive heat. With my hat pulled down over my eyes to keep out some of the glare, I doze off. Now this is still Captain Rickenbacker talking. Something landed on my head. I knew that it was a seagull. I don't know how I knew, but I just knew. Everyone else knew too. No one said a word. But peering out from under my hat brim without moving my head, I could see the expression on their faces. They were staring at the gull. The gull meant food if I could catch it. And the rest, as they say, is history. Captain Eddie caught the gull. Its flesh was eaten. Its intestines were used for bait to catch fish. Their survivors were sustained and their hopes renewed because a lone seagull, uncharacteristically hundreds of miles from land, offered itself as a sacrifice. You know that Captain Eddie made it. And now you know that he never forgot. Because every Friday evening, about sunset, on a lonely stretch along the eastern Florida seacoast, you can see an old man walking, white-haired, bushy-eyebrowed, slightly bent over. His bucket filled with shrimp was to feed the gulls, to remember that one which, on a day long past, gave itself without a struggle, like manna in the wilderness. And now you know the rest of the story. Love you guys. Bye-bye.